Minister, just to ask you, as Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade, to outline the efforts that are being made by your department to demonstrate to our EU partners the special and unique position of Northern Ireland in relation to Brexit, particularly in light of the decision by the British Prime Minister May not to appoint the Northern Ireland Secretary of State as a permanent member of her Brexit committee. That's something that we find rather curious. I think Northern Ireland is in a position where it is 3% of the population of the United Kingdom, and my grave concern is that by the Prime Minister's actions she is showing that Northern Ireland will be peripheral and irrelevant in Britain's discussions, and I think it behoves us and you as Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Republic of Ireland to advocate on their behalf.
Thank you. Minister, you've got 2 moments.
Thank you. The organisation and membership of UK Cabinet Committee structures for leaving the European Union is a matter solely for the UK Government. Our Government has made clear that the matter of Northern Ireland and indeed the peace process is a top priority in our approach to the UK departure from the European Union. I and my Cabinet colleagues will be working with a range of stakeholders, including the Northern Ireland Executive, to ensure that the outcome of any EU-UK negotiations takes account of the unique and particular circumstances of Northern Ireland. Our priorities in this area are to ensure that the Good Friday Agreement and the overall balance of the settlement is protected following the UK's exit from the European Union, and of course to maintain the open and effectively invisible border. The wider economic impact for the all-island economy are of course also a concern, as is the potential consequence for EU support under peace and Interreg programmes. The Government and the British Government have reaffirmed that the Good Friday Agreement is the indispensable foundation for all engagement on Northern Ireland. This provides much-needed reassurance for people and the political system in Northern Ireland, but we are under no illusion about the hard work needed to deliver it. As co-guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement, the Government is determined that the provisions of the agreement are protected and reflected in any new relationship between the European Union and the United Kingdom. The exit on the part of the UK from the European Union will be a lengthy and complex political negotiation over the next 2 years or more, involving all EU member states and EU institutions as appropriate. As a committed EU member state, the Government will be playing an active role in these negotiations once they begin, with a view towards ensuring that Ireland's interests and those of the wider European Union. As part of our preparations for this process, I have carried out a round of contacts with all of my EU counterparts in order to make them aware of the need for specific arrangements which protect the key gains of the peace process on this island, a process to which the European Union has already made a key contribution. Taoiseach has met with Chancellor Merkel, President Hollande and President of the European Council Donald Tusk and other EU heads of government to convey the concern of Ireland. This is an ongoing process of engagement, and the Taoiseach, Taoiseach and myself recently met with the Commission's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, in Dublin. Our embassy network across the European Union is being fully deployed in support of this process, which will be assisted also by the allocation of additional resources to our permanent representation in Brussels and our embassies in Paris, in Berlin and London. I can assure the House that the Government will continue to use its influence with our EU partners in the upcoming EU exit negotiations to highlight the unique circumstances of Northern Ireland and the consequences for North-South cooperation on the island as a whole, which must be factored into any new relationship between the European Union and the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy O'Brien, 1 minute.
Minister, you are correct in stating again that lengthy and complex political negotiations lie ahead for this country and indeed our European partners. I think there is a balance to be struck as well, that in no way, shape or form should we be used as a Trojan horse by the British Government either. I think it gives us an opportunity to reaffirm our commitment as a strong and intrinsic part of the European Union and a member that wants to continue and even strengthen its ties further with the European Union, whilst endeavouring to ensure that the north of Ireland in particular and that our neighbours in Britain that we're able to continue into the future in trading for the good of both of our peoples. What I would ask you, though, in light of the Prime Minister's announcement about the Great Repeal Bill, will your department be watching very carefully the elements of the Great Repeal Bill, and I use that in inverted commas, proposed by the British Prime Minister, to make sure that areas within it do not contravene the Good Friday Agreement voted on by all of the people on this island? And what steps will you take to ensure that that does not happen? I was most concerned about Britain's unilateral decision to remove themselves from the European Court of Human Rights jurisdiction, which in my view does contravene the Good Friday Agreement. But I would like to ask the Minister what steps he will take to ensure that the Department watches that.
Minister, 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Gerda. I think the Deputy makes a reasonable point, and as I have said, the priority on the part of the Government is to ensure that the Good Friday Agreement and the overall balance of the settlement is not in any way disturbed by the UK's exit from the European Union, and of course that we make every effort to ensure the protection and maintenance of what is effectively an invisible border between North and South. The legal and political obligations of both the Irish and British governments under the Good Friday Agreement remain unchanged, regardless of the status of the United Kingdom, either within the European Union or outside of the European Union. And I believe it is important to record that both the Taoiseach and Prime Minister May confirmed in their first discussion on the 13th of July and at their first meeting in Downing Street on the 26th of July that the Good Friday Agreement remains the basis and will continue to remain the basis of the two governments' approach to Northern Ireland. I have had similar discussions with both the Secretary of State for exiting the EU, David Davies, and Foreign Secretary Johnson on the UK referendum result. I had a detailed discussion on the implications of the UK withdrawal from the European Union on Northern Ireland during my bilateral meeting with Secretary of State Brokenshire on the 13th of September, and I reinforced the important point that has been made by Deputy O'Brien.
Final minute to you, Deputy.
Thank you, Minister, for your response. And what I would say, this is a multifaceted approach is required here, and my concern from not specifically with your own interaction with your counterparts, but from government preparation with regard to Brexit and the potential risks to our country and, most importantly, to jobs and people's livelihoods here in Ireland. Do you not believe it's time for government to appoint a minister to deal specifically with Brexit? You've mentioned in your answers here that Taoiseach Taoiseach, yourself, other ministers are in regular contact, and I certainly welcome that. My concern is that whilst everyone seems to be in charge, that no one is in charge. And would you agree, Minister, that now is the time to actually appoint a minister for Brexit that will deal with Ireland's relationship with Britain, but just as, if not more importantly, our future relations with Europe, to cement our place in the centre of the European Union, so that we can show our colleagues in Europe that whilst we will advocate for special status for Northern Ireland, and rightly so under the Good Friday Agreement, that we will also ensure that we are put back to the centre of European policy making?